Hello, everybody. This is Thor, and today we're going to be talking about Mars retrograde on October 30th. And this is going to be a quite intense energy, specifically because it's happening during eclipse season. So on October 25th, we have the solar eclipse that's happening in the sign of Libra. And then on November 8th, we have the lunar eclipse that's happening in the sign of Aries, another Martian component to the whole mix. So this is going to be quite intense. And I'm going to show you in the chart that Mars is actually going to be stationing on the natal Mars in the USA chart. So I do feel that this is going to be a very volatile and catalytic time, especially when we're looking at things like the stock market and so forth. I believe that these are going to be very heavily affected during this time, and we're going to see a lot of volatility, and it's going to be a bear market big time. And we can't put our finger quite on what the event's going to be, but there is going to be a disruption caused by some sort of warfare or something which Mars represents. And we're going to explain and talk about that in a moment when I show you guys the chart. For those of you that are new, please like and subscribe to my channel. And thank you for all of you that have gotten readings and supported the channel in any type of way. I really appreciate it. And just so you all are aware, I do Vedic sidereal astrology, not Western tropical astrology. And the goal is 10,000 subscribers. And I believe we're almost at 1,500 at the moment. If you're interested in a private reading, check the details down below. And it's 40% off all the readings off on my website. So check that out when you get the chance. All right, so let's talk about what exactly this Mars retrograde represents. We're going to talk about the sign, the nakshatra, and what all that means in just a moment here. So as you are aware, Mars retrograde starts October 30th, 2022, and it's going to station at 1 degree of Gemini in the nakshatra called Mrigasira. And that's the Orion constellation. It's interesting that the meanings that we have behind Mrigasira is things like impulsive reactions, being spooked, jolted. Think about that, because the symbolism of Mrigasira is a deer. So think about if you're walking in a forest and you approach a deer and it suddenly gets jolted and they spook really fast, right? Well, that's the symbolism with what's happening with this Mars energy. There's this spook event that's probably going to happen on October 30th or around October 30th, which is going to be spooking not only the world, but also the markets. So there's some sort of catalytic event that's coming. Let's go back to the slide here. And when Mars goes retrograde, it's going to be in Gemini for 15 days since it's only at 1 degree. And then it's going to go back in the Taurus. And then the retrograde is going to end January 18th. So this is a couple months of retrograde motion we're going to be having. During this time, on a personal level, you will notice people, acting irrationally, acting impulsively. People that have not dealt with stored anger, they might be issues with that. So this is going to be affecting even our personal lives and our relationships, not only mentioning just, the world leaders as well, which is going to be really intense to have world leaders experiencing this type of energy. And that's demonstrated in the USA chart. And then remember, we just did Kamala Harris's chart, and there's a lot of energy that's Mars retrograde is going to be afflicting in that chart, which is quite interesting. Let's go back to the slide here. Let's talk about what Gemini means. I really want to break this down to you guys. So Gemini is associated with the 3rd house. So Gemini traditionally represents communication, media, messaging, social media, trade, commerce, business transactions. So that's what I typically think of the 3rd house in Gemini as, is just business and busyness. That's really what it represents. So day-to-day scripted conversations and the transactions that we conduct on a daily basis. So when Mars is going retrograde in that sign and it's stationing there, it does have that vibe of there's some sort of energetic disruption there. And this could come through some sort of cyber warfare or other aggressive action that happens on that day. So this is going to be quite an intense energy. And I believe because the third house is so connected to the stock market and so connected to business, that's why I feel like we're going to see some sort of disruption during that time. The energy is going to be so amplified when it hits that 1 degree mark, by the way. So whenever a planet is about to change direction, it kind of stands still for about a day or two, depending on how fast moving the planet is. And then there's this really strong energetic release. Well, it's well known whenever we look at any type of transit, Mars is always one of the most influential planets as far as triggering events and triggering karmas, because Mars is just this activator type of planet. It has this yang energy that really goes outward and externalizes itself. So it affects a lot of things around it. Where some planets are more of an internalized energy. It just depends on what the planet is. For example, Venus is more of an internalized, attracting type of energy, whereas Mars is that outgoing energy. So let's go back to the chart. I'm going to show you guys the USA chart right now. And so when the Mars retrograde happens on October 30th, it's going to be happening right here. And I'm drawing it in the chart for you to see. This is the USA chart, remember. And look, it's right on top of the natal Mars in the USA chart. That is intense. It's triggering the planet of war, aggression, catalytic events. And it's in the nakshatra that I told you all about of being spooked. Some sort of reaction happening around this time. October 30th. That's when that's going to happen. And then it's going to stay in Gemini for about 2 weeks. And let me show you what the retrograde motion is going to do. It's going to be going backwards into the sign of Taurus. Well, the reason why I think it's going to be affecting asset prices so much, like real estate prices, is because Taurus is the natural second house of stored value. So even though it's the seventh house in the USA chart, in the natural zodiac, it represents the second house. So assets are represented by the second house. So when Mars is going back in there, Mars brings a destructive energy to that. So I do feel like we are on some thin ice at the moment. This is a really interesting time. Now, keep in mind with when Mars stations here in the 8th house or in the sign of Gemini, it's also the 8th house of the USA chart. And the 8th house is such an explosive house. The 8th house represents trauma. It represents sudden events that come out of nowhere. The illustration of the 8th house would be the Tower card in the tarot deck. So that's how much explosive energy is coming out of the 8th house. It's the type of shock and awe type events that happen. So that's why it's got me so concerned when I see it in the USA chart. Not to mention the solar eclipse is happening in the 12th house. The lunar eclipse is happening in the 6th house. So we have really a recipe of very explosive energies right now. And I do feel, well, it's just like dominoes. Once you have too many catalytic events happening, it's going to affect the market. It's going to affect the economy. And that's what I really see happening. So let's go to the next slide here. Taurus, I already let you guys know that it represents, stored assets. So things like real estate, commodities, farmland, food. I think the food prices are going to increase quite a bit with whatever's about to happen. So that's likely as well. So all these things are kind of brewing with all these eclipse energies, and Mars is really going to set it off. Now, this retrograde is going to be going till January, and then Mars is going to be staying in Taurus for quite some time, for a few more months. So this is going to be, I feel like the markets are going to be very volatile during this time, but I feel like for the remaining part of the year, especially since it's going to be retrograde into Taurus, I do feel like we're going to see a downtime here. And what that specific catalytic event is, I do feel like it's something associated with Mars. Mars is all about warfare. Mars is all about sudden, random events that happen. Mars itself is the Karaka of the eighth house. So there is this crazy, explosive events that are going to happen. Could it be a chain event? Could it be a singular event? I can't really put my finger on that, but I do feel like there's some volatile events happening. And the third house, because it represents communications and it represents business, there's something happening, which it could be cyber warfare. So let's take a look at the slide here. The catalyst event to happen with Mars when it stations, and it doesn't necessarily need to be on the day, it could be around the day. So keep that in mind. It's likely to strongly affect the USA because it hits natal Mars in the USA chart. This event could be a cyber warfare or other aggressive actions that will spook markets. Remember, Marigasira, spooking something. And markets will be volatile for the Mars retrograde. This is going to be a very intense time. And also in your personal lives, it's going to be intense with people around you. So I do feel like I have some remedies, especially if you're feeling a lot of internalized anger in yourself. And some of the remedies I have is dealing with grounding yourself. So you're going to want to go outside and walk on the grass in your bare feet. And you're going to want to really ground yourself and ground that energy into the earth. You're also going to want to have a way to channel that Martian energy. So if you go to the gym, or you go take martial arts, or you practice yoga, this is going to be a good time for all those types of movements to really release that energy so that it doesn't come out, in your relationship, so you don't lose your cool and have volatile emotions. As far as planetary remedies, the remedy for Mars is going to be red coral. However, I would make sure if you guys wear red coral to make sure that Mars rules a beneficial house in your chart before you do that. So one of the houses, usually 1, 5, or 9. So otherwise, you're going to have to take different stress relief practices like meditation will also work during this time, because I feel like a lot of stuff is going to be coming up, especially if you're in the US and with the eighth house being triggered. So take care of yourselves during this time. I do feel like this is going to be quite volatile. Let me know what you guys think by commenting down below. Let me know if you think I'm off the mark, or do you think that maybe I got it? Maybe I'm getting this right. So thank you so much, guys, and I'll see you guys in the next one.